Hello. I am going to show you a few watercolor techniques today. This is Natalie from Artful Transformations. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to learn about, I'll just write them out. We're going to learn how to use scumbling, glazing, we're going to use how to use salt. We're going to use how to use salt with a glaze. And then we're going to try a few sponges. And see how they turn out. So, you'll see that I have two squares here that are already colored in. It doesn't really matter what color you're using. We just need a base layer for the glaze. So, to start, if you are doing this along with me, you're going to want to color in a couple of squares. If you're doing it in this format, I just, excuse me, made it in 6 squares because I knew that's what I was going to do today. But if you're just using scrap paper, you could just maybe make a little area where it's a color, and it doesn't have to be 2 different colors. It can be the same color. So once you have that, you'll let that dry, and then you'll be where I'm at. Okay, so this morning I have 2 cups of water, one for rinsing out my brush, and one to use to wet my watercolor pan. I have a watercolor pan. This is my Winsor & Newton. I don't remember if it's the professional pan. I think so. So that's that. And then I have a couple of ceramic dishes for sponging. You can use your sponges directly into your pan, but I don't really want to rip up my sponges and make them smaller. So I'm gonna put watercolor pigment in here and then go from there. I have a bunch of different sponges here to play with. Some are natural and some are synthetic. I have a pair of gloves for when I do my sponges so that I don't get my fingers all watercolored. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. And then I have a mop brush. This one is, I believe it's squirrel hair. And it's a number 14 mop brush. I also have a flat of the same brand that's a 7. And then for scumbling this morning, I have just a little synthetic, I think it's a 1, but it's not numbered, so it's probably one of those brushes that came in like a kit or something. But as long as it's got, it's smaller and it's got a little spring and its bristles, we're good to go and we can use it. So that is what we shall do. So to get, oh, and I also have some Himalayan sea salt. I just have the coarse ground because that's what I have in my kitchen today. You could also use the bigger ones, or you can use table salt. Different kinds of salts do different things. And we're not going to be doing it today, but you can dissolve your salt in water and then use the water as to create a wash, and then do wet and wet, and that changes some things too. So if you want to experiment with that, that's pretty cool. All right, so let's get started with scumbling. So all scumbling is just scribbling. So we're gonna, I'm gonna get some water on my brush, and I've already played with the Alizerian Crimson this morning for this block. So I'm just gonna go ahead and continue with that color. So what scumbling is it's literally just going and making little circles, but you wanna make them as tiny as possible. I'm making them big so that you can see what I'm doing. But you wanna make them small. Just little guys. And this can be useful for all kinds of things, creating textures on animals that maybe have feathers or fur. It could be creating texture on the ground, where maybe there's some stones or something. So that is all scumbling is. It's just little tiny scribbles. Okay. So on to glazing. Oh, I also have a paper towel so that I can wipe off my brushes. All right, so glazing is just layering one color over another, and it's another way that we can blend. It's also a way that we can use if we are creating depth in a watercolor. We can layer over another layer of the same color or a different color to kind of add a shadow or a highlight. So it would be similar to doing that in acrylic. All right, so I'm gonna wet my brush, and I've already got alizarin crimson on here, and this one was cobalt blue, so it's already a wet pan. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do the cobalt blue. And it's just creating a nice even wash over the top. And I'm not really sure why part of my paper is acting like I touched it, because it's not. But you'll notice that up here when I put the blue on, it was kind of spreading away from a specific spot. I don't know if I can get it to do it again, but if your watercolor does that, that usually means that there's some type of an oil on your paper, whether you touched it or I'm not sure, or somebody else touched it and you just don't know. So what this is all glazing is just creating that other layer on top of this layer. Now I'm doing a pretty opaque layer. You could make it a lot darker if you wanted to, right? That's where those highlights would come, or I'm sorry, those shadows, that depth would come from. It also changes the base color, right? So this is now, instead of being alizarin crimson, it's turning kind of more into a purple color because it's blending together. So that is glazing. For salt, for the first salt, this is going to take a little bit to dry, but that's okay. I will just show the finished product to you in a photograph or clip it to the end of this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a new color. I'm a purple fan, so we're going to go with purple. And I'm just going to create a wash of purple in this square. I think I'm maybe just on the super coarse side of my paper this morning, and that could be part of it. All right. So when we're doing salt, we don't want a whole bunch of water. So I'm going to go back and kind of steal some of the water that's coming out. I don't often use my mop brushes. They soak up a lot of water and a lot of pigment, which makes them great watercolor brushes. I just don't practice with them enough. So it limits my ability to get the right water consistency. All right, so what I have is it's wet, there's a sheen on it, and I know you probably can't see that from where you're sitting, but there is a sheen on it. There's just no puddles, and that's kind of where we want it to live when we're adding salt. If we add salt to puddles, we don't get the same effect. And if we add salt when it's too dry, we don't get the same effect. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the salt and I'm just sprinkling it over the top of my wash. And we're just gonna let it sit there until the whole thing dries, okay? So in the meantime, we're gonna get started over here on the salt and the glaze. So we've got this blue layer, and as we know, glazing is just layering. So we're gonna go ahead and actually I'll show you what a synthetic brush. Okay, kind of looks like. So I have a 1-inch synthetic brush here, and it won't hold nearly as much water. And it is also way bigger than my pan. So let's see, what do I want to use? Let's do a green over our blue. You kind of see the difference between when I did the glaze up there with my mop brush, my squirrel hair, and down here with my synthetic. It doesn't nearly have the amount of water, but it also, the bristles leave their own little mark. Their little trails. So there's no wrong preference whenever you're choosing brushes. So if you are a person that loves these synthetic ones, then you do you and use the synthetic ones. No problems there. You'll just get different effects with different brushes, so it's good to play with bunches of different ones. See which ones you like. All right, so I've got my glaze here. I'm gonna kind of pull. I dried my brush, and I'm just kind of pulling a little bit of the water off so I get to a spot where I can use that salt. Okay, so now I've gotten to that place. I've got a nice little sheen, but it's not a bunch of puddles. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm just gonna take the salt and I'm gonna just drizzle it all over the top of what I just glazed. Right, and then I let it do its thing and try to get it out of my square for sponging. Okay, so sponges can be fun because they make all kinds of different textures. You can do all kinds of different movements with them. Let's see, try to find a synthetic and, okay, so here's my, I think this is you want my only synthetic? Not really sure. So here's a synthetic brush, obviously synthetic. And then I've got some, or not brush. It's early for me. All right, so not brush, sponge, synthetic sponge. And then I'm pretty sure that these guys are natural. So we're gonna use one of the naturals and one of the synthetics. And I'm gonna just grab one of my mop brushes, and I'm gonna add some watercolor to my ceramic dish so that I have it to dunk into. Kind of, all right, so I've got a nice purple going on in there. We'll see what that does. And let's see, maybe with my purple I do a yellow because they're complementary, and why not? So let's get yellow in the other guy. Okay. Oops. So we've got our yellow and our purple. I'm gonna put on some gloves so that I don't get my fingers all gross. Well, not gross, but colorful, because not that I really truly mind, but all right. So I'm just gonna dunk my sponge, my dry sponge in, and see what this looks like. So if I dab it with my natural sponge, I get this nice little, I don't know, cloud-like texture. And then I can also kind of drag it, but this guy doesn't have much texture that way. I can try doing it this way. Just, and you can try different spots on the sponge. That might give you more of a texture. in other spots. So sponges can be super fun. You can layer colors. So I've got yellow, so I can go through and layer the colors and kind of mix them in this way, or go over what I've already gone over and give it kind of a glaze. So super fun. Okay, and then if I tried this guy, which is definitely synthetic, I highly doubt he's going to have a whole bunch of texture, but oh, I'm kind of wrong, he does. So we can kind of, he's kind of round, so I'm kind of rolling him. But if I swipe him, or if I do kind of the other stuff, then that's what he looks like. We can go back in and grab some yellow and swatch that in there and see what that looks like. So that's kind of fun. Just a fun technique to try. Gives you different textures than a brush would. So always fun. All right, so let's see. How are we doing on our salt? Not quite dry. It does look like it is pulling. All right, so I'm gonna let this salt dry and come back and show you what the salt does in a quick clip that I'll just add to this video. So I'll be back. Okay, so I am all dry here, and here is the salt on top of my glaze. Mine didn't turn out exactly how I had hoped it would. Usually what happens is where these salt grains are, and there's a little bit of salt left on there, which is sometimes hard to get off. But usually, let's see if I can get any of those hard ones to do it. When you take the salt off, it will actually show your base color through. So we should be seeing more blue through that. Trying to get it to focus. And we do kind of see a little bit, but not nearly the amount that I was hoping for. So that just means that we probably need it a little bit wetter before we add the salt. So, and then over here we have our little texture left. You can see the dots where the salt is left. Often what happens is the salt will actually take away the paint and leave white instead of the dark purple. But I've heard that different climates can affect this this technique. So you would really just have to play around with it and see what it looks like for your area. I know my studio right now is really dry because it's winter time, but outside's pretty damp. Not so much humid, but I'm not really sure. So, all right, so that's what we got. We got our scumbling, we got our glaze, our salt, some sponge painting, and then we've got our salt and glaze. All right, so if you would like to learn more about watercolor techniques, you can always join me for a Back to Basics watercolor class or a paint party style watercolor class here at the studio, or find my classes online on our Etsy at www.artfultransformations.etsy.com. And if you want all of the classes all of the time, you can find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/artfultransformations, where you can subscribe and have new classes every month in different mediums. All right, it was wonderful working with you today, and I can't wait to create with you in the future. Happy creating.